You may have heard that practicing with a metronome can help you to play in the correct rhythm, and you're curious to try but are not sure what speed you should start with. Or perhaps you've already tried playing with the metronome, but you couldn't figure out what numbers you should put in there that would work with your pieces. My name is Zuzanna, I am a harpist and a harp teacher, and in this episode of the Coffee Break Harp we will have a look at picking the right speed for your metronome practice, step by step. There are a few things to bear in mind before you start practicing with the metronome. The most important question to ask is, does this piece feel familiar enough for me to add an extra layer? Even though metronome can be a great help when your goal is to play in correct rhythm, it won't magically fix all the problems. If you're still working out the notes, or if you don't quite understand the rhythm, the metronome won't help, and sometimes it may make you feel more frustrated. This is not to say that you need to know the piece perfectly to be able to take advantage of the metronome, but you need to be quite sure that the most basic challenges are out of the way before you add the metronome. So you should be able to name the notes with little hesitation and understand the rhythm in the piece, know where the main beats are and how to count out loud. One of the main reasons harp learners get frustrated when playing with the metronome is that they start using it too early. So before you start, it's good to make sure that you feel familiar enough with the piece that you work on. The sound of the metronome is one extra thing to pay attention to, and you need to make sure that you've got some mental space available for that. If after what I said just now you're thinking that you may need to wait for quite a while before playing with the metronome, please don't worry. I have another episode coming for those of you who are looking for ways of getting used to metronome before using it in the pieces, so make sure you subscribe to Coffee Break Harp so you get notified when it's out. Before we set the tempo, there is one more important thing about your metronome settings that is worth checking. Some metronomes will allow you to set up different beats. This means that you will get a different tone every few beats. For example, when you choose 4, you will get a different sound every 4th beat. For most of your metronome practice, you won't need that, and if you're just starting out, these different beats may just confuse you. So depending on what device or app you're using, it's best to choose either 0 or 1 if you're working with the numbers, or disable beats if you've got an option like that, so you get the same tone all the time. Now we're going to look at your score for some guidance. And I know that some pieces will give you an indication of tempo or even metronome speed, but this is not something we will worry about at this stage. This is just an indication of what speed you may want to perform the piece, but it's definitely not an obligation, so you may choose to perform your piece at a different speed, and you definitely can and should go at a slower speed when you're still learning. What is most important here is checking at what stage you're at, like a snapshot of where you are in terms of the speed, and working out what tempo will be helpful for you where you are right now, not the speed that the composer would have liked their piece to be performed at. For that, we will need to find what is the most difficult section for you in this piece. This will dictate what you'll do with the rest. There's no point having different speeds in different sections of the piece. When you're working with the metronome, the goal is to help you play the whole piece at one speed. This is what the metronome is really for. So you want to make sure that the speed that you choose will work for all sections, including the tricky ones. I'll use as an example my arrangement of The Water is Wide. If you'd like to listen to the whole piece or get the score, I'll put a link for you here. So let's say that bars 24 to 26 are your tricky section, and we will want to find out what is the best speed for you there. If you find it hard to determine the speed just by playing a section through, you can record yourself playing it. When you listen back, pay attention to any places where you can hear yourself stopping or hesitating. If this happens, try to play this section again, but at a slower speed this time. You need to go slow enough so you can close all those gaps in these hesitant moments. In a piece with left-hand patterns like here, most players will tend to hesitate before the first beat, where they need to have the left hand ready in advance to play. So make sure that the speed that you play at is slow enough for your left hand to be able to find the next chord. Just because the metronome is this extra thing that you will need to pay attention to, after you found your tempo, you may want to take the metronome speed a notch or two down, just to make it slower. This is to give you some extra leeway when playing with the metronome, because when you listen not only to yourself but also to the clicking of the metronome, you may not have as much mental space available to remember about all the usual things you've worked on in your practice. It may turn out that you won't need this safety margin, but it's always better to start with this and then see that you can safely go faster rather than the other way around. Okay, so let's say that you found the comfortable speed that works for this section, and perhaps it sounds like that. And perhaps you've tried to find the metronome speed that will work for the main beats of this piece, so the crotchets or the quarter notes, and then you discover that your metronome doesn't go that slow. Before you despair and let your inner critic start the usual thing about how hopeless this is, I need to tell you that this is absolutely normal for players at all levels, including the professionals. That's why musicians came up with something called subdivision. This basically means looking for smaller beats within the main beats of your piece and using these smaller time values to help you to practice playing the correct rhythm even at the lower speeds. For the water is wide, you have an indication of this at the very beginning of the piece. Right in the very first bar, you see quavers or 8 notes in the right-hand part. This is one example of subdivision that you could use in this piece. So for example, if your metronome indicates that you should play the crotchets or the quarter notes at a speed of around 25, and this is assuming that your metronome does go that low, to find out your quaver beat or 8-note beat, you will need to multiply this by 2, so 2 times 25. This means that your quaver beat or your 8-note beat will be 50. Or what you can do is compare the notes that you hear to the sound of the metronome and then work out where the metronome meets the sounds of the piece. If you hear it clicking together with all the quavers or with all the 8 notes and nothing sounding in between, this means that your beat is a quaver beat or 8-note beat. This will sound like this. At this point, I need to explain something about the low speeds on the metronome. Even though at this stage you will need to practice slowly, very slow speeds can make it really hard to play together with the metronome. This is because when too much time is passing between the clicks, we can lose the sense of pulse because we don't know when to expect the next beat. This is another instance where subdividing the beats will be really useful. For this piece, you will actually find another option for subdivision in the tricky place that we looked at earlier. Your right hand is playing semiquavers or 16 notes, and you can definitely use this for your subdivision too. 16 notes will be twice as fast as 8 notes, so if your 8 notes were at 50, your 16 notes will be 100. This will sound like that. Some of you may find hearing this many clicks of the metronome slightly annoying, but it's worth giving it a try too, as you will likely find going for the smaller values easier. It's usually a lot easier to skip a click or two of the metronome when you've got a longer note, rather than try to work out how fast your smaller time values need to be between the beats. That's why at these very first stages we should not get too hung up on the indication of the tempo or the time signature. If you follow the time signature suggestion for this piece and go for a crotchet or a quarter note beat, you may find it quite hard to work out how fast exactly need the 3 smaller notes inside the beat be, because you will only know for sure when to pluck the first out of the 3. But if you know the speed of the semiquavers or the 16 notes and you are aware that you're letting go of the last click out of the 4 at the very end, you will likely find it all a lot more manageable. Now, let me know in the comments, how does it feel to play with the metronome? Have you found it challenging to figure out the right speed? If you've never worked with a metronome and are not sure where to start, I've got another episode on this topic coming, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you all here very soon. Take care for now. Bye!